We are here today chatting with Juan. Juan is one of our former family source intended parents. It is super nice to meet you, and I'm sad to be missing Sergio as well. But I'm excited to hear about your journey to parenthood. When did you both decide you wanted to become parents, and what led you to surrogacy in the first place?
Yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to be a parent since I was younger. So for me, when I started dating Sergio, for me, that was a deal breaker. So within a few weeks of dating Sergio and seeing the potential that this was going to go long term, I just asked him point blank, I'm like, are you willing to have a child? Because it's something that I really want. And it's a deal breaker. And he said, of course. He's like, who would not want to have a child? He didn't think it would be possible in the past, so he didn't really live with that expectation because he grew up in Chile and he's a little older, so like he just didn't think that that was possible for people like us. So so when I asked him, he was really excited and he said of course. And then so that was back in like, I don't know, fall of 2017 or no, fall of 2018, which is when we had met. And then right after we discussed that, we then decided to discuss whether we wanted to do surrogacy or adoption. I work in the medical field in pediatrics. So while, you know, I love adoption and I think it's very noble, like I have seen a lot of heartbreak through adoption. Sergio and I talked and we just don't think that we would be able to deal with that if we like had a child and then had to lose him or her that way. So so we decided to go through the surrogacy option. Now that was going to be down the road. Now so Sergio at that point, he was like in his late 40s, I was in my mid 30s. So for me, I was like, oh, this is like long term, like this is like in a few years. And then as we kept dating and we realized this was going to be serious and we got engaged in March of 2019, Sergio was like, so when are we going to start this? And I was like, what? He's like, well, it's like, I'm older. I would like to, he's an athlete. He used to play professional soccer. So he's like, I would like to still be able to like play soccer or play sports with my child. I want to be like mobile to the best of my abilities. So I would like to start it sooner rather than later. And I was like, okay. I'm like, I mean, life-wise, I'm in a ready position. I just wasn't like mentally there because I didn't expect it to be that soon. So, but I was like, okay, we'll start looking into it. So I did some research and I found the Men Having Babies conference that actually was coming to Chicago in April that year. So so we signed up for it and then we went. And then for Sergio, it was educational because he's not in the medical field, so he learned more about everything going on. But the most important thing is that we got contacts of some agencies and some fertility clinics, which is kind of what we wanted. So that was in April 2019. And then we're like, great, I have this information. And I'm like, you know, let's build up our finances for it first. In my mind, I was saying that. And then within a few months, they're just like, so have you called any agencies, any clinics? I was like, oh, he's like, well, I was like, I would be like, well, I don't know about the finances. He's like, well, we won't know unless we kind of talk to the agencies in the clinic and see how much this is going to be and if we have the finances or not. So he pushed me. So by August of 2019, we reached out to a couple fertility clinics and then we reached out to family source consultants. So for us, it was more about like what we felt when we met with those people and with the agency or with the clinic. And especially Sergio, he goes a lot by like vibes and he gets very good like gut feelings and stuff. So so we just were like, well, we're not gonna worry too like, yeah, we're gonna get the information about how much it's gonna cost to know we have the money, but to make a decision for us, it was more like, do we get a good feel for it?
Right.
So we first met with Family Source Consultants, and pretty much as soon as we were there and we talked with them, we did it in person because we went to the office in Chicago. So we went in person, and pretty much after we left, Sergio's like, I get a good vibe. Like, I think like this is it. So right away, we made the decision to stick with Family Source Consultants. With the fertility clinics, we did go to a couple. The ones that we got in from having a baby and then reconfirmed by Family Source Consultant, they also helped us they told us the clinics that they work the most closely with, and the doctors that they work most closely with. So we went to one and it was but then we went to the second one, and like Sergio said that like he like dozed off, like daydreamed, and then he like woke up and he's like, oh my God, I just picture myself with the baby. He's like, this is so then that's the clinic that we went through. And then, finances, like we didn't have the finances right away, but then in Family Source Consultants, they gave us the loan information, the fertility loan information. So if we were able to get the maximum of that, then we would be able to start the process at that time. So we applied for the loan and we got it. So then we started everything right then. So the process for us went relatively smoothly. I mean, everyone always talked at the conference about how there's always like hiccups and things get delayed and things don't work out and stuff like that. So I think overall ours went pretty smoothly. So let's see. So we met with Family Source Consultants about like August. By September, we had the money and we said that, yes, we're going to start this. We knew that the surrogacy match process was going to be much longer than the egg donation and fertility cycle. So we started with, that's what we started with the surrogacy agency. And then once that was all squared off and they were like in the process of finding us a match, then we started working with an egg donor agency. We just looked at a couple. For that one, we just kind of looked at a couple of banks and see, or not banks, I guess, agencies, and look at the donors that they had. And then while we were doing that, then we were doing our fertility portion because we also have to get tested. So we were doing our fertility portion while we were finding an egg donor. Once we found an egg donor and that all was going through, I think it was December to January when she was getting her testing done and all that. So, and then in December, so that's like 3 months after we started looking for a surrogate, like we matched, and we were surprised because we had heard that it usually takes about 6 months. We're like, oh, okay. So they first gave us a surrogate that looked good, but again, Sergio was not getting that like feeling, that like vibe. Like I'm like, she's fine, but I don't know, I'm just not sensing it. And again, because we were not in any rush because we hadn't even done the fertility, the embryo. So we're like, it's fine, we'll wait for another one. And then like a few weeks later, like we matched with another one, and it was perfect. Like we looked at her application, and it was like everything was fantastic. And then they were in Wisconsin, which was close to Chicago, where we're from. So we're like, great. It's like driving distance, so like we don't have to fly with a newborn when the baby's born and like deal with all that. So then we said yes, we're willing to meet with her. Then we had our kind of Zoom call with her and her husband to chat, and again got a good vibe. Like they seemed like good people. Like it seemed almost like they were people who we would be friends with if they lived here, which was really nice. And she had already been a surrogate before, which helped. So so that was December. Then in January, she came down for her, I think it was January, maybe early February. She came down for her screening. And then when she came down for her screening, we actually met with her and her husband. We went out to eat, and again, like it was like we would totally be friends with them if they lived here. So it was really, really great. And then everything passed with the fertility process. I mean, with her screening process. So then we started the contract, like the lawyer started writing the contract and stuff. And that took a few months, which I didn't expect, but it worked out because our egg donor was still doing her donation. So like I knew the matching process. They had to have, it was going to be like about 6 months, but like the egg donor contract part was so fast that I didn't realize. I mean, obviously the surrogacy contract is a lot more detailed and a lot more goes into it. But I didn't realize that was also going to be a few months. So I think that's good for people to know, to keep in mind, when they have kind of a timeline set. So while we were doing the contract, the egg donor, so our egg donor had her cycle. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very successful cycle. So we were debating whether we would use the product of that cycle, knowing that if it didn't work the first time, we might need to go then do another cycle. And then for us, that was like, well, I mean, if we wait till the surrogate is ready and transfer the embryo and it doesn't work and then have to do another egg donor, I mean, that's gonna be so much. So we decided to, like, since things were not ready anyways with the surrogate, we decided, you know what, let's just do another cycle with someone else. So we picked another egg donor and did another cycle, and COVID hit during this. So the surrogacy, so we started probably the contract with the surrogate, the process around February. Maybe by May, it was like finalized, right. Which is a time she would have been able to get a transfer anyway, because she had a C-section May a year prior, so they wanted to wait a year. So, but then COVID hit, so then they were delaying transfers anyway. So even if we had a successful cycle with the egg donor, we still would have had a delay no matter what because of COVID. So while there was that delay, they were at least still doing egg donations and embryos. So we're like, okay, so then we're definitely gonna try a second one. So then we did a second egg donor that went through pretty quickly, and then by July we had embryos and we had a successful cycle with plenty of embryos. And I think by July we would have been able to do a transfer, but I think the clinic was open again to do transfers, but that's when we got the embryos. So then in August we kind of scheduled the transfer, and then everything worked well. The embryo kind of stuck, and so the real process started. So it feels like you know, pregnancies take what, like they say 9 months. It's kind of it's really close, kind of to 10 months. But with this process, it feels like 2 years, because like just by the time you get pregnant, like it already had been a year since we started the process. Right. So it definitely is like has a mental toll, especially as like things get closer to the like when you're halfway through the pregnancy, then you have to do kind of like the parentage process, like with the lawyers, and then like Sergio was like more like, when is baby gonna be here? Like this has been so long, and it hadn't been that long for the pregnancy, but it just felt like it had been. So I think that's something that I also recommend to people. It's like, it's the long process, like be ready for it, like enjoy what you can, but also know that it's like people just think like because the initial process is so long to do the transfer, people think like, okay, the transfer, now the baby's coming. Probably took us took us like 18 to 20 months total from beginning to end. So it really wasn't too bad. I mean, we've heard of people who had to spend over 2 years because things were just not going right, or you know, the transfers didn't take or whatever. So during the surrogacy, during the pregnancy itself, everything went very smoothly. The surrogate had done it before, so she was in a new city, so she had a new OB and stuff, but she kind of knew already what she wanted, and she already had 2 of her own kids. Um, so it went smoothly. You know, we talked a lot, not always about the pregnancy. Like we were very close, so we would chat about like her daughters or like our dog and like what we're doing, blah blah. And then she would send us updates like with pictures like every week about of her belly. And then obviously because of COVID, we weren't able to go to any of her appointments or ultrasounds. But she would definitely like film like the ultrasounds to hear the heartbeat and stuff like that, even though she was not supposed to. She would sneak it in, at least to hear the audio of the heartbeat.
Right.
And then she would send us the pictures of the ultrasounds when they did the ultrasounds, and then of course put us on the phone with the doctors when they wanted to speak to us. We were not very picky parents, I would say. We had no restrictions for her other than, you know, the typical like no drinking, no smoking, things like that. But we really trusted her and trusted that she knew what she was doing. So whenever there were questions that she would pose for us, like, what do you guys think about this versus this? We're like, well, what do you want? I mean, we thought the whole time we really treated her like, well, it's your body. So like, I know it's our baby. Like, as long as our baby is safe, like, it's your body. So you do the decisions that like you feel are best. But like, we really appreciated that she always involved us. Like, there was a point where we were discussing whether she was going to do a vaginal delivery after C-section, or what they call like a VBAC, or a repeat C-section. She really had a tough time recovering from previous C-section, so she really wanted to do a vaginal if she could. And we were like very for it. We're like, it's your body, like as long as the baby's safe, like you can do whatever like you want. But she was very sweet because she's like, well, you know what, I feel bad. I said, if I do that, then like it's not a scheduled C-section, so you guys may not be able to be here for the birth. Like, and we were so like taken aback by that like she was like really considering us. And we were like, again, we just want a healthy baby. Like, we trust you guys. We know that if we're not there when the baby is born, like the baby will be in good hands with you guys. Like, we're totally fine as long as the baby is healthy. Like, and even if you have a scheduled C-section, you might go into labor earlier and like we still won't be there. So like it's fine. But we really like that we had that open conversation and really would discuss those things very openly. But again, aside from that, I think she was also taken aback by how not picky or not like we weren't like letting her really do what she wanted. So the pregnancy went pretty smooth. Up until the end, when it was actually very interesting. So it was the day that we had our parentage proceeding. We were doing it through Zoom. That was April 26th. She was at that point 36 and change weeks. And Sergio and I noticed that she didn't look very comfortable during the parentage proceeding. And then afterwards we asked her, like, were you okay? She's like, yeah, I'm feeling a little pain. She's like, I feel like I'm just dehydrated and having like, you know, some pain. Like, I'll just drink and then see how I feel later that day. And then about 4 hours later, her husband calls us that she's in the hospital because she was not feeling great. He's like, oh, they're probably just gonna give her IV fluids and come home. And then an hour later, he's like, oh no, baby's coming. Like, the day we had the parentage proceeding, which was for me was like, I just want to get to the parentage proceeding because at least at the final part of the things that you want to do, and you can always do it afterwards. But like then the birth certificate like takes longer, and like I had to wait like sometimes. So I was like, if we could get that done before the baby's here, like that's like what I want. So literally the day the parentage proceeding was done, it's like the baby knew that we were waiting for that day.
Yes.
It's like, okay, I'm ready.
It was the perfect time for everybody.
Like, oh, you're done? Okay, I'm coming out now. I can't wait to meet you guys. So that same day, the baby was born that evening. And then there were some complications for her and for the baby afterwards. But everything was fine. The baby did have to go to the NICU because our baby, his name is Tomas. He had some breathing problems because he was big for his size and he was born a little bit early, so his lungs just weren't like quite ready for the real world. So he was in the NICU for like 9 days, just kind of working on breathing, but everything went pretty smoothly from that. And then she had some bleeding, but they took care of that pretty quickly, and she was able to go home in a few days. And then the good thing about us being in the NICU was that she was able to meet the baby. So like she said that last time she had her journey, she had twins for a couple, but one of the babies needed to go to the NICU. So then like they kind of just like rushed into the NICU, and then she went home, and like they were not from the area, so they kind of just, she's like, I never got to really hold the baby and stuff, which she really wanted to. And she had told us from the beginning, like she wanted to, the daughters wanted to meet the baby and hold the baby. And we were like, yes, yes, yes. So then when they told her we're going to the NICU, again, I was bummed again because I felt like she was going to miss that time that she wanted. And she was bummed, obviously, because she really wanted to spend time with the baby. But because we were in the NICU in Madison, which is like an hour and a half from where she lives, but because we were there for 9 days, she had recovered enough that she was able to drive down. So,
nice.
So on our discharge day, we met with her and her husband, and then they were able to like hold the baby and spend time with the baby, and it was nice. And then they're gonna come. They're driving down to Ohio in we still keep in touch, and they're driving to Ohio in about a month, and then they're gonna stop by Chicago. And then
nice. That'll be so much fun.
Yeah. So the girls met the baby through FaceTime, her daughters, but they couldn't like really meet him in person. So I'm excited for them to meet him because I know they really wanted to meet him in person.
So how old is Tomas now?
So Tomas is 2 months now.
Nice. Okay. Just thinking back through your whole journey that you just told me about, at the beginning when you started pursuing surrogacy, did you have any drawback from any friends or family on both yours and Sergio's decision to pursue surrogacy, or was everybody pretty much supportive of it?
Everyone was pretty supportive about us doing surrogacy. I think people didn't realize how expensive it was until we were telling them. They're like, oh wow. But no, we didn't have any drawback. I mean, a lot of women were like, someone volunteering to get pregnant for you guys, like, wow, I would never be able to do that. So good for her. Yeah, I was like, well, I mean, if people have like nice pregnancies, I mean, not everyone has a nice, smooth pregnancy, so I understand why people wouldn't want to do that for someone else.
Yes.
But I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad, obviously, that there's people out there willing to do it, and and I think it's like the intention, but you know, they also are getting money, so it's like, and like our surrogate was very like honest about that. It's like, yeah, would I do this for free? No. I mean, so the money helps, but like I would, but I also want to help people. So
right.
But yeah, no, our family and friends were all excited that we were just doing
That's awesome.
I think if anything, people were just more surprised because I don't think a lot of people know that like gay couples do this, or I think like maybe my family just didn't thought like, okay, well, he's just we're not gonna get children from that family. So, and so then they would be like kind of surprised, like, oh, you do, like that's awesome, like almost like we didn't expect to have like, a child coming from you guys.
I know you said you had one surrogate that you were thinking about and you decided not to go with her. So the second one, was there anything that really stood out to y'all whenever you chose her?
So really, like on paper, they both looked good. But when it comes to the pictures, that's where kind of Sergio was getting the vibe. But then when we got the second one, I mean, like there was a picture with like her husband, her 3 kids, like they just looked like a loving, nurturing family, and we were like, that's what we want, like a loving, nurturing environment, and like we just got that feeling from the picture. So we really just went really by the picture. So it really does make a difference. And I think other than the pictures, the only really difference was that one was a single parent, that one was like that. So we just felt like, you know, it's a process, and it was gonna be the first. Like probably even if it's a single mother, they've gone through the process before. Then I'm like, okay, like they know the emotional, mental toll that it might take, and they like have a support system. But being a single mother and being the first one, we're like, well, does she have the support?
Right.
So that's the only other thing that kind of we took in consideration with
Sure.
the decision.
Throughout any journey like this, there's obviously appointments, there's lawyers to deal with, there's, I mean, a host of things that you go through. And like you said, it was a long journey, or at least it seems like it is, you know, whenever you're in it. How did a family source help you navigate through each step to ensure that you had a meaningful journey throughout the entire process?
Yeah. So, I mean, family source was great. They were on top of everything. So whenever like a due date was approaching for something, like they would contact us. I mean, at the beginning, like they were always sending us updates also about like the surrogate and be like, she's coming to the doctor to get like her screening this day. She's coming to get her transferred this day. She's starting her meds this day. But that part we always knew before because the surrogate and I, we just talked
Right.
at it all the time. So I eventually, like Nicole was like, you probably know this, but the surrogate having her transfer because she kind of knew that we were very close in contact, but she still always kept that communication there. And then during the pregnancy itself, I think was when they were most helpful. I mean, they would have been really helpful in that communication, but Erica was telling me all that. But during, you know, there are things that like once you're pregnant, it's like, okay, it's done. But then like there's things that need to happen, right? Like we need to start the parentage process at some point. We need to start like preparing for the hospital and getting our packet, like things like that like we don't really think about too much. So it was nice that family source consultant, the person that we had, Nicole, she just kept like reminding us, like we're approaching week whatever, this is a week that we want to start the parentage process, so contact your lawyer about it. So so she was good to keep us on track because those are dates that you I mean, even though they were on our contract, that by that day you had to do that, like man, like you don't think about it really when you're pregnant. You're just like, whoo, we're done. So it was good. The communication was awesome. Even when there was not a lot going on, she would still check in like every week or two, be like just seeing how everything's going, anything I can help with, stuff like that, which was great. She also was a liaison with the trust that kind of funneled the money from us to the surrogate to meet the deadline. So that was good. Like she would like give us warnings when funds were running low, or if the trust was going to do something like that they might not have communicated to us. Like she just always communicated stuff to us, even though we might have known it. She just didn't assume. So it was very good because like I personally didn't mind getting like redundant emails. I mean, I thought that was good for me because I was like, okay, they're on top of it. They know what's going on, which is nice. And yeah, so the whole time it was great communication.
What one piece of advice could you give to new intended parents? And we can even say new intended parents that are gay, like you and Sergio. Like, what's the biggest piece of advice that you could give them coming into the surrogacy journey for the first time?
So it's probably a couple things. I would definitely say go with your gut and your feeling. Like don't the finances are probably going to be about the same. There's going to be unexpected expenses that you didn't expect. So like even when you see on paper first, doesn't really translate. So like I wouldn't focus too much on that. I would really go with your gut in where you're getting a good feeling for the agencies, for the clinics, for the surrogate, for like everything in the process, even to the lawyers. So trust your gut. Be mentally prepared for the process. So it's not a typical pregnancy. The process takes a lot longer. So make sure that you are prepared for there and expect some kind of bumps in the road. So I mean, even though I was expecting, and when we got one, like it was frustrating for like about a week or two, and then we were like, okay, well, you know, it happened, so move on. But like it's good to at least anticipate that things are going to happen. We have friends going through the process, and even though I told them to expect it, I still think they thought like everything was going to go smooth sailing, and they got really, really bummed down for a while for it. So really expect, be mentally prepared for the journey, and really just enjoy it. Think about the finish line.
Yes.
That's what I tell my friends. I'm like, think about what the end product is going to be.
Mhm.
That's what's going to motivate you to keep going forward. No matter what bums are, no matter how much extra expenses are happening as the process is going, like think about that beautiful end result. That's what you always wanted and you will
Yes.
have. So that will keep you motivated and continue to go forward.